This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said the Gaza ceasefire may not be permanent and Israel reserves the right to return to fighting in new, forceful ways. Several people have been seriously injured in a ski lift accident at a resort in northern Spain. And President-elect Donald Trump has left Florida for Washington ahead of his inauguration on Monday. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Yasmin Alibi-Brown, columnist at The Eye, and Lucy Beresford, broadcaster and psychotherapist. But first, let's take a quick look at some of those front pages. Well, The Observer says aid agencies in Gaza are bracing for chaos as thousands of people return home after tomorrow's ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The Express reports on the Shadow Chancellor's claim that Rachel Reeves's policies will push up Britain's borrowing costs by £12 billion. The Mail says Donald Trump's White House team are planning to help Nigel Farage's bid to become Prime Minister. The Mirror says it has a special report on patients being crammed in on trolleys while waiting for A&E treatment as the NHS continues to struggle. The Telegraph leads on the row over the Attorney General's involvement in asylum deals for the Chagos refugees. Nearly 42,000 pupils in England are getting extra time in GCSE and A-level examinations, 4 times as many as a decade ago. That's on the front of the Sunday Times. And we are joined tonight by Yasmin Alibi-Brown and Lucy Beresford. Thank you both so much for being with us on, it has to be said, a really busy weekend of news. And, you can tell by the front pages. 2 stories dominate the inauguration leading up to it, but obviously the ceasefire that should happen about, I think, 8 hours from now, 6:30 UK time. Let's just start with The Observer, because they have an interesting take. As part of the ceasefire agreement, a lot of people in Gaza will be allowed to go back to their homes. Northern Gaza, one of those parts that has been almost completely destroyed. So aid agencies really gearing up for that. So Yasmin, let me start with you, both the story, but just generally what you've made of the coverage of the ceasefire.
Well, there is no ceasefire, let me tell you. We've just heard, you've just said what Netanyahu has said. Since announcing the ceasefire to today, over 100 people have been killed, including a young female doctor and her entire family. What's happened so far is not just that people have been killed, the entire fabric of that society has been ripped apart. The artists, the teachers, doctors, surgeons, everybody has, journalists, how many? Over 140?
I think it's more than 200 now.
And you are still getting Netanyahu saying, I'm going to go back and fight. So I have no faith in this ceasefire. And if these people trek home and the devastation, imagine, Lucy's a psychotherapist, imagine coming home to that. What does that do to your head? Those who are living.
The trauma of it is really quite powerful. I think the story that The Observer is running with is a very sort of on-the-ground story about what chaos there might actually be in the first few hours and days of this particular ceasefire. But it is a bigger story than just what's going to happen on the ground, because there's so much that's unknown. It's a very fragile deal. It's a very fragile peace that has been won. And that's because you've still got Netanyahu trying to maintain the stability of his cabinet. You've got Hamas, who are also equally divided, the Hamas leaders that are overseas versus the Hamas leaders that are actually on the ground in Gaza. So you've got this very localised story, which the Observer is flagging up, and quite rightly, I think it is going to be chaotic as people seek to go back home. But let's be clear, this is a geopolitical story, and it does feed into the Trump inauguration, which is now, less than 2 days away. And that's because a lot of people are actually saying, we wouldn't be where we are today, we wouldn't be where we are right now at 10:30 at night if it hadn't been Donald Trump saying, if the hostages aren't back by the time I'm in president, you know, all hell will break loose. How much he's been the X factor in all of this remains to be seen.
I mean, Yasmin, you mentioned what Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying, which is also in the Sunday Telegraph. So if you look at the Sunday Telegraph, it says Netanyahu, he gave his first televised address where he basically said that Israel reserves the right to resume war. He also said we will achieve all the goals of the war and bring back the hostages. So phase one, very much a temporary ceasefire, and huge question marks, first of all, about phase one, which, you know, still hasn't started.
There's no ceasefire. He's not going to allow this to happen. And, you know, I really want the Israeli hostages to come home, for them to get their answers. But I also want us to remember the full story. Hundreds of Palestinians, including children. A doctor disappeared last week. And actually, it was Kit Malthouse, the Tory, who said in Parliament, he's been taken and we know what they will do to him. So the hostage situation isn't a one-way thing here. And I hear nothing about the Palestinian hostages of the Israeli government. We have to be fair to all sides, I think.
Well, there is going to be, I mean, Palestinian prisoners will be released in the first phase, 735 at first, then 1,067 still as part of the first phase. Look, that's the plan, and then we'll see what happens on all sides.
There are so many moving parts here, because
Exactly.
actually, you know, when Netanyahu says, you know, one of the first things we wanted to know was, what are the names of the people who are going to be released tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? It's now 10:30 at night in the UK. And if Hamas aren't prepared to do the first thing, the first little piece of the jigsaw that was meant to kind of kickstart a lot of these things, you can understand the hesitancy or the reluctance of someone like Netanyahu, who is having to juggle, as I say, so many people in his cabinet who think he's sold out already, who think that actually, even though, you know, I think there are nearly 75% of people in Israel are fully behind the peace deal in the sense that they want to see the hostages come home. But they're very nervous about the fact the last time that happened in 2011, when we had Gilad Shalit, who was traded. This was a soldier who was kidnapped, and he was traded for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, one of whom was the architect of the atrocities on October the 7th. So people are incredibly nervous about the different stages, and if the first little bit at the beginning of the first piece of the jigsaw falls away, then everything will start to unravel, and that's really worrying.
You can't just put the blame on Hamas.
Why not?
I would not trust, because I do not trust Netanyahu's intentions. I have no faith in what he says or his inner team. And the idea that he's kind of being held hostage doesn't make sense to me.
But that's the problem. And in a situation like this, all sides almost have to hold their nose and say, we're going to have to do things that we never really wanted to do in order to see the bigger picture. And in a way, sometimes it takes a mediator. And whatever one might think about Donald Trump, he definitely had this one line, which is that if these hostages are not coming home by the time I'm president, I can tell you, there will be all hell let loose. And that is the first thing that we need to see.
Yes, we do have to move on.
They'll come home, but the war will not stop. I'm telling you that. Israel is not going to stop. I'm telling you that. Remember the words.
A cessation of violence, though, certainly at least the aid agencies, you know, want to bring in more aid, medical aid and assistance, and certainly for the people of Gaza, if that stops. It can only be good news. Let's go to another story. I mean, we mentioned Donald Trump, of course, the catalyst, some say, for all of this. If we go to The Observer on the front page, Khan warns of march of fascism as Trump takes power again. Lucy, very strong word there, fascism.
Yes, so won't surprise anyone that we don't agree on this story. I personally think it's very inflammatory language. This is Sadiq Khan, who is, in a way, breaking ranks by actually saying, I think this is going to see a realignment of he's talking about the far right, but I don't know whether some of the people that he's cited would necessarily agree with that. He's observing that certain people like Giorgia Meloni and I think
Eric Zemmour
from France is also going to be at the inauguration.
Yeah. Viktor Orban, I think, from Hungary is going
At the same time, it's very important to remember that certain Viktor Orban and Giorgia Meloni, they are elected leaders of their country. They're not people who suddenly randomly became the head of their country through a coup. And when Sadiq Khan talks about it in this way, I have so much faith in some of the things that he does say. I just wish he didn't feel the need to be this inflammatory, to really talk about people who are the legitimate leaders of their country.
Listen, they are fascists. Meloni is a fascist. Hitler was voted in by the people of Germany. Democracy can produce the most appalling results. So I think we have to be a little bit careful and say just because people were elected, we may not fear them or criticize them. And I really admire Khan, whom I've known for over 35 years. So I'm making a declaration here. I knew him before he was a politician. Because there's this sucking up to Trump now, the Emperor Trump. Everybody's kissing his rings, you know. Zuckerberg, all of them are surrendering to this man who is appalling, in my view. And Trump and Khan is having the courage to say what a lot of people in this country are feeling.
We'll move on because then we'll talk about the influence that Trump is having here. Obviously, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, would deny that she is a fascist or that her party is, even though they have roots in neo-fascism. But she has renounced all of that. Let's go now to the Mail on Sunday, and also kind of linked to the front page of the Times. But if you look at the Mail on Sunday, Team Trump's revenge on Starmer for meddling in U.S. election. And I think the Sunday Times, if we can go to that as well, could give us an idea of what some of that meddling could be, because the question there is Mandelson at risk from MAGA? So, Lucy, tie in those
Well, again,
stories,
I just
please.
love the fact that this man, Donald Trump, has so much star power that he is literally infiltrating every single story on the front pages. Yes, it's his inauguration, so obviously that's going to be part of the process. But he is part of the Gaza story. He is part of the Israel story, and he's also part of our domestic politics. So the rumour is, and it's tricky because we haven't actually got very much information from the front of the Mail yet. We haven't got the inside pages, but there is apparently some call to not be very flattering to Keir Starmer, to not invite him to be one of the early leaders to come and visit Trump in the same way as, for example, Theresa May was the first overseas leader.
We may not have details from the Mail on Sunday, but we do have an indication from the Sunday Times, the Peter Mandelson story.
Correct.
And here they're saying, and forgive me, Yasmin, maybe you can give me the details, that basically they could block Lord Mandelson as ambassador. Has there ever been a precedent for that?
There's never been a precedent. And the idea that he's got star quality, Lucy, it's Donald Trump you're talking about.
Yes, but this is the point.
No,
This
it's not
is
star.
that actually
it's just
people
he's a
it's the
brute.
magnetism of power.
His power is brutish power. He doesn't care about the rules. And he thinks he can do this. And I find it funny that they're accusing our country of meddling in US affairs when Musk declared that he was going to unseat our Prime Minister.
So what would you do? You think it's better that we don't engage with someone like him? Of course you have to engage with him.
I don't think one should fall over. No, we can have relations, but they have to be proper and critical relations. How far would you go? How far would you go with your compromises? There's got to be some values.
Yasmin, Lucy, forgive me, we're going to have to leave it there. So we'll be discussing it again, but coming up, why a third of students will now get extra time for their exams. That's coming up. Stay with us.
The Premier League is on NBC and Peacock. It's a clash in the capital. Arsenal. Aston Villa. Saturday on NBC and Peacock.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and 'Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Yasmin Alibai-Brown and Lucy Beresford. Thanks for staying with us. Let's go to the Sunday Times. Not quite exam time right now, but it is an exam story. Third of pupils now get extra time in exams. Lucy, talk me through it. Is this actually when they're sitting the exam?
It is. So we've got Ofcol, which is the exam regulator, and they've identified that nearly a third of pupils are now being given, particularly within the independent sector, are being given this extra time, often up to maybe a quarter of extra time. And that's because these children have cognitive learning disabilities, they might have dyslexia, autism, sensory differences. And what I have to say from a clinical perspective, and I speak now on behalf of many of my colleagues, maybe 20 years ago, we might have seen maybe one person under the age of 16 with an attention deficit disorder diagnosis, maybe once a month. Now we seem to be getting about 5 a day.
And why do you think
So
that
what
is?
is that? Is it because suddenly we're becoming much slicker at diagnosing these people? Or do we have a lot of parents who've worked out that this is the way to get their children to have more time in exams? So I simply put it out there that there seems to be an extraordinary ability for a certain cohort of people to be able to say, my child is really needing this extra support, and as a result, please could you write a note so that they can get more time in exams? And I think it's very worrying, because what we're in danger of doing, and this kind of leads into something that Tony Blair was talking about last week, and he got a lot of criticism for talking specifically about mental health. But I think we're in grave danger of pathologising a lot of behaviour that children have that's actually very natural for childhood and adolescence.
Yasmin, what do you think?
No, I don't know enough about it, but I think Lucy's put it very well. But I do think that we've always had this facility. And what I think we also have to admit that our children, there have been world studies on happiness in children, And British children come out near the bottom. And we need to find out why. And I don't think it's because we're spoiling them too much. There's something, and we're not the only ones. There are other societies where unhappiness among young people and children is going up. And we need to explore that. And I think it might be tied.
Is that part of it?
The social media might be a lot to do with it, but I also think, I don't know, broken families, sense of feeling, doom and gloom everywhere. I just don't know. But we should be concerned that countries in Africa have children who are happier than ours.
I thought the brave attempt by the Australian government to ban phones for all kids under the age of 16 was really, really
I think they've banned
impressive.
social media, haven't they, for kids under 16?
That's right, but in many ways, many of these children won't be using their phones for anything else. They don't actually use them to make a call. So I think we're being realistic here. What the Australian government are trying to do is to say, can we give our children their childhoods back?
Yeah. On a final story, front page of the Sunday Times again. This is about Harry, Prince Harry, of course. He's got a new podcast. Yasmin, what's this new podcast?
Well,
or he's going to have a new podcast?
He's working for his living. He's no longer dependent on our money. And they do all sorts of things which people of his class do, which is...
It's got a headline, though. Why is it Harry's Sociopath
I
podcast?
think they always want to malign this man and his wife. He's apparently pitched, he's only just pitched an idea to do a podcast interviewing big, powerful men. That's all it is.
Including Mark ... I'd love to know which Mark it is.
We'll find out on page 3.
And we'll be getting a lot of this Harry slating because he's in town. And now, we're going to have this Hate Harry.
I mean, let's be clear, everybody, their world and their wife, including me, has a podcast. So I don't see why Harry shouldn't jump on the bandwagon. But it's the fact that they were actually getting $20 million for their podcast.
Well, if they earn it and they get it, it's not taken from you or me.
It's not going to be better than my podcast, Yasmin, and I'm not getting $20 million.
You should call your agent.
Exactly. Pitch the sociopath idea.
Lucy, Yasmin, I'm going to have to leave it there, but I will see you both in the next hour. Thank you so much.